Hannah's heart raced as she entered the old house. It had been years since she stepped inside, but the memories came flooding back. The floor creaked beneath her feet, each step a reminder of what had happened. Shadows seemed to stretch along the walls, moving when they shouldn't have. Hannah paused, her breath quickening. Something wasn't right. The air felt thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She turned toward the stairs, hearing a faint whisper from above. Her skin prickled, and the hairs on her neck stood up. She took a step forward, drawn by something she couldn't explain, but the whisper grew louder, now a voice, clear and chilling. "Don't come up!" Hannah froze. It was a voice she knew, one she hadn't heard in years, but one she would never forget. Her chest tightened. Hannah's past had returned. The whisper echoed again, sending a chill down Hannah's spine. "Don't come up?" The voice was unmistakable, and it sent a wave of dread crashing over her. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. It was familiar, but haunting. She froze for a moment, her mind racing to place the voice. But it was a voice she couldn't ignore, one that haunted her every step. As the silence stretched on, she felt the weight of something heavy in the air. The house felt alive, as if it were breathing with her. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to mock her hesitation. Then, with a steadying breath, Hannah took another step forward. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open slightly, as if inviting her into the unknown. She felt a pull, something beyond her control, drawing her in. Hannah had barely taken another step when a cold breeze washed over her, like an icy hand brushing against her skin. She shuddered, feeling the hair on her arms stand on end. The whisper came again, more insistent this time. "Hannah." It was a whisper from the past, from someone she had never expected to hear again. Her breath caught in her throat, and she felt her stomach churn with dread. Who could it be? Who was speaking to her? And why now? She turned toward the door at the top of the stairs, the room beyond it dark and filled with secrets she wasn't ready to face. But there was no going back. She had come this far, and now she could hear her heart pounding in her chest. She had no choice but to open the door. As Hannah reached the top of the stairs, the door creaked open wider, revealing a room she remembered all too well. The air inside was thick with dust, the smell of decay hanging heavily in the air. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw the remnants of something long forgotten. Old furniture, covered in white sheets, seemed to loom in the corners, waiting for her to make the first move. But there was something else, something far darker. She could feel it, pressing in on her, suffocating her. The house was alive, and it was watching her. Then she heard it, the faintest sound of footsteps behind her, slow and deliberate. The footsteps came closer, echoing through the silence like a heartbeat in the dark. Hannah turned quickly, but saw nothing. The chill in the air grew stronger, and she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. Panic surged in her chest, and she spun back toward the room. There, in the corner of the room, was a shadow, a figure, just barely visible, standing completely still. It didn't move. It just watched her. Her heart pounded as she took a step back, but the figure didn't advance. It was as if it was waiting for her to make the next move. Hannah felt her knees weaken, and for the first time she truly feared that the house was alive. The house felt colder now, the air thick with something unexplainable. Hannah stood in the center of the living room, her eyes darting around, catching fleeting glimpses of movement in the corners of her vision. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Each breath she took seemed to echo louder in the silence. The house creaked and groaned, as if it were alive, warning her to leave. But Hannah wasn't ready to run. Not yet. Something pulled her forward, a quiet, insistent whisper, urging her toward the dark hallway at the end of the room. She took a step, then another, her body tense with anticipation. Her pulse raced as the whispers grew louder, clearer, now unmistakably close. "You shouldn't be here." The words sent a shiver down her spine, but still she pressed on. Something in this house had to give. Hannah had to find out what it was. As Hannah stepped closer to the dark hallway, the air grew colder, her breath visible in the dim light. The silence was oppressive, but her feet moved on their own, as if something was guiding her. She didn't want to go, but her curiosity and fear mixed into something more powerful than her hesitation. The whispers became more distinct. "Hannah, don't." The voice pleaded. She knew it, recognized it from years ago. It was her mother's voice, but twisted with something darker, more desperate. Hannah's heart raced as she reached the hallway. The door at the end stood slightly ajar, revealing nothing but pitch black beyond. Her hand shook as she reached for the door, each step she took seeming to echo through the house. Something was waiting for her inside, and though she was terrified, she had to know what it was. She pushed the door open with a creak, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. The door creaked open, revealing an old, decaying room that had clearly been untouched for years. Hannah stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling in some areas, revealing the damp wood beneath. The air smelled stale, filled with the scent of mold and forgotten memories. There was an old rocking chair in the center of the room, its fabric torn and worn. Hannah took a cautious step forward, and then she saw it, an old photo frame, cracked and dusty, sitting on a small table. Her hand reached for it, the picture inside nearly hidden beneath years of grime. As her fingers brushed the glass, the air shifted, and she felt a sudden cold breath on the back of her neck. The room felt alive, as if something in it was waiting. But there was no turning back now. She had to face whatever had been calling her. As Hannah examined the photo frame, the silence of the room was suddenly shattered by a loud thump from above. She jumped, her heart racing. The photo slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft crack. She bent to pick it up, but when she looked at the picture, her breath caught in her throat. It was a photograph of her, but from years ago, a moment she had long forgotten. She was a child standing next to a figure she couldn't quite make out. The edges of the photo were worn, and a dark stain covered part of the image. Then, a voice echoed in the room, louder now. "You shouldn't have come here, Hannah." It wasn't her mother's voice anymore. It was something else, something far older. The room seemed to close in on her. She felt trapped, as if the walls were pressing in from every side. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "Leave now, or you'll never leave." Hannah stood up quickly, backing away from the table. She tried to steady her breath, but her hands trembled, and her body shook with fear. She couldn't explain it, but something in the air had changed. The weight of the room, the presence of something unseen, it was suffocating. She turned toward the door, but as she reached for the handle, it slammed shut in her face. Panic surged through her as she scrambled to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers came again, louder, more frantic. "Hannah, run!" Hannah's heart raced, and she finally backed away from the door. She wasn't alone in this house. Something was here, and wasn't going to let her leave. Hannah backed away from the door, her hands trembling as she took a step backward. The room around her seemed to close in, the air heavy and suffocating. Every breath felt like it could be her last. The whispers were now deafening. "You can't leave, Hannah." She spun around, her eyes searching for the source of the voice, but found nothing but shadows. Panic surged through her veins. There was no escape. The house was alive, and it was getting stronger. Hannah felt her body tremble as her heart raced. She had to get out, but she couldn't remember how she had come in. She tried to steady herself, but the shadows seemed to dance at the edge of her vision, growing closer with every passing second. "Please," she whispered to no one in particular, "just let me go." But the house would not let her. Hannah moved slowly, trying to make her way toward the door again. The walls seemed to shift, as if the house itself was alive, twisting and contorting around her. The whispers grew louder, now mixed with heavy breathing, like someone was just behind her. The air was thick with fear, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest. "Hannah," the voice breathed. It was familiar, but Hannah couldn't place it. She turned around, expecting to see something, anything. But there was nothing, just the shadows. A dark figure suddenly appeared at the edge of the room, its shape hard to distinguish. It moved closer, but when Hannah blinked, it was gone. Panic flooded her chest, and she stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. She was not alone. The door slammed shut behind her again, this time with such force that Hannah felt the walls shake. She spun around, her hands reaching for the doorknob, but the door wouldn't budge. "Let me out," she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. The whispers seemed to turn into laughter, echoing around her. "It's too late for you, Hannah." She backed away, her chest tight with fear. She looked around, trying to find an escape. But the room had become even darker, the shadows swallowing up the light. Her breathing was shallow, and her heart pounded in her ears. Every movement she made seemed to provoke the house, making the atmosphere grow colder, more hostile. Hannah knew she was trapped, and there was no way out. Hannah collapsed to the floor, her body shaking uncontrollably. The shadows were closing in, surrounding her, and the whispers turned into voices. She could hear them clearly now, speaking in unison. "You can't escape, Hannah. You're ours." Hannah's mind raced, but she couldn't think straight. The room seemed to spin, and the walls began to close in on her. She tried to scream, but her voice was lost in the overwhelming noise. The room felt like a cage, and she was its prisoner. Desperation clawed at her insides as she crawled toward the corner of the room, but the shadows seemed to move with her, blocking her path. There was no escape. The shadows began to twist, taking form, coalescing into something dark and monstrous. Hannah gasped, her body frozen in place. The figure that emerged from the shadows was taller than any human, its shape barely visible, but its presence overwhelming. The whispers stopped, replaced by a single guttural voice. "It's time to join us." The figure moved toward her, its form undulating, as if made of darkness itself. Hannah tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Fear gripped her, making her legs feel like lead. The figure was inches away now, and she could feel the cold emanating from it. She closed her eyes, waiting for the inevitable, but just as the darkness reached for her, the room fell silent. The figure paused, as if waiting. Hannah stood frozen, her body shaking as the dark figure loomed over her. The air felt like ice, suffocating her, making it harder to breathe. She could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on her chest. "You cannot escape," the figure whispered. Its voice was both familiar and terrifying. Hannah's mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. It wasn't just a shadow, it was something far worse. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took a step back, but the figure seemed to follow her every movement. "I'll make you one of us," it said, its voice like 1,000 whispers overlapping, sending a chill through her spine. Hannah's fear reached its peak as she realized there was no one to help her. She was alone in this house, trapped in its suffocating grip. The shadows were everywhere now. Hannah couldn't take her eyes off the figure. It was like a nightmare made flesh, something that shouldn't exist. She tried to speak, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. The figure stepped closer, its shadow swallowing the room. "Why are you doing this?" Hannah whispered, her voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The figure remained silent for a moment before it spoke again, its voice colder than the darkest winter night. "You are mine now," the words echoed through the room, making Hannah feel even more trapped. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, as if the house itself had taken hold of her. Every attempt to escape seemed futile. The walls seemed to press in on her, and the figure continued to draw closer, its form shifting and warping. The figure was close now, so close that Hannah could feel the coldness emanating from it. The darkness around her deepened, and she felt herself sinking into it, like she was being pulled into the earth. She stumbled backward, but her legs felt weak. "Please let me go," she begged. "I don't belong here." The figure's presence loomed larger, suffocating. "You are part of this house," it replied, its voice low and haunting. "This place is yours now, as it was always meant to be." Hannah's mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. She couldn't be trapped here, not again. She had to get out. She had to find a way to escape the nightmare that was her life. But the figure stepped closer, and the darkness seemed to close in, cutting off every escape. Just as Hannah thought she couldn't take it anymore, a voice, an unfamiliar voice, echoed in the distance. "Leave her alone," it called, breaking through the oppressive silence. The figure paused for a moment, its form rippling, but before Hannah could react, the voice came again, this time clearer. "Hannah, listen to me." Hannah turned toward the voice, desperate for help, but saw nothing. The figure seemed to hesitate, then its shadowy tendrils surged toward her. "You cannot save her," the figure growled. The darkness intensified, and Hannah realized the voice wasn't just any voice. It was the voice of someone she knew, someone from her past. But who? She felt dizzy, the room spinning. "Don't let it take you, Hannah," the voice urged. She had to make a choice. The voice echoed again, more urgent this time. "Hannah, you have to fight back. It's not too late." Hannah felt the dark presence retreat slightly, as the voice grew stronger, more commanding. She didn't know where it was coming from, but she could feel the power in it. "You can do this," the voice encouraged. "Don't let it control you." The shadows seemed to falter, giving Hannah a moment of clarity. She took a deep breath, summoning all her strength. "I won't let you win," she whispered, though her voice trembled. She reached for the darkness, her hands shaking but determined. "This ends now." The figure recoiled slightly, its form flickering as if uncertain. For the first time, Hannah felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could defeat the darkness that had haunted her for so long. The shadow recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. Hannah stepped forward, her breath steady despite the overwhelming darkness around her. "I won't let you control me anymore," she whispered, her voice low but filled with defiance. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the walls shifting as if the house itself was alive. The figure's presence was weakening, but Hannah knew it wasn't over yet. It would fight back. The darkness surged forward again, but this time Hannah was ready. She raised her hands as if to push the figure away. The shadows around her seemed to grow lighter, fading with every breath she took. "This ends now," she said, louder this time, her confidence building. The figure hesitated, and for a moment it seemed to shrink. The house was no longer as oppressive, the shadows receding with every step she took. The figure wavered, its form shifting and fading with every breath Hannah took. She could feel it weakening, but she knew the final blow had yet to come. The voice of the house, now a mere whisper, echoed one last time. "You cannot defeat me," it hissed. But Hannah refused to listen. The figure lunged at her again, but this time she was ready. With a swift motion, she slammed her hands forward, and a wave of light burst from her palms, engulfing the darkness. The room trembled as the light fought the shadows, pushing them back with an overwhelming force. Hannah's heart raced as the figure screamed, its form disintegrating into nothingness. She stood firm, eyes closed, as the house seemed to exhale, releasing its grip on her. As the light grew stronger, Hannah felt the house's grip finally loosen. The whispers faded, replaced by silence. Hannah opened her eyes and looked around. The shadows that once consumed the room had vanished, leaving only the remnants of a broken house behind. The air was lighter now, less oppressive, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Hannah felt a sense of freedom. She had done it. She had defeated the darkness. But as she took a deep breath, she realized something. The house may have been rid of the shadow, but its memories remained like scars in the walls. "It's over," she whispered, though part of her knew that the past could never truly be erased. As Hannah stepped forward, the house seemed to breathe one last time, its groans soft and mournful. It was as if it was accepting her victory, yet mourning its own defeat. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, and for a moment she could feel the weight of the house history pressing down on her. It had been a place of darkness, a place of fear, but now it was just a shell of what it had once been. Hannah took another step, her hand brushing the walls as she moved. "I'm free," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But as she reached the door, something unexpected happened. The faintest whisper came from behind her. "You may have won today, but the shadows never truly leave." Hannah froze, her hand on the door, as the house seemed to exhale one final breath. Hannah hesitated for a moment, the final words of the house echoing in her mind. She opened the door and stepped outside into the night air, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. For the first time, the world felt alive again. The darkness that had consumed her for so long was gone, but it had left its mark. Hannah looked back at the house, now just a silhouette in the distance. She knew she would never forget what had happened there, but she also knew that it was time to move on. The shadows had taken so much from her, but they would never take her future. As she walked away, the house behind her seemed to fade into the night, leaving her to face whatever came next. Free at last, Hannah stepped away from the house, feeling the weight of everything she had just escaped. The world seemed quiet, too quiet, as if it was holding its breath. The air was cool, and the moon cast long shadows across the empty road ahead. Her heart still raced, the fear from the darkness clinging to her. But it was different now. The house was behind her, and she was free. Yet, something lingered, like a shadow in her mind. Hannah shook her head, trying to push the thought away. "It's over," she whispered, but even as she said the words, she knew the house's grip might never fully let go. She couldn't forget the whispers, the figure, or the suffocating darkness. But for now, all she could do was keep walking forward, away from it all. She could feel the weight of her own thoughts, heavy and unshakable. The silence felt almost unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Hannah could hear the distant rustle of leaves in the wind, but there was no sound of cars, no voices, nothing. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the house behind her. But it was just a dark shape now, fading into the night. She felt a pang of unease. Was it truly gone, or was it waiting for her, just out of sight? Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise from the woods on her left. Something moving in the trees. Hannah stopped, her breath catching in her throat. "Hello," she called, her voice shaking slightly. But the sound ceased, leaving only the quiet night. Maybe it was just her mind playing tricks, but Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. Something unseen. The sound from the woods faded, leaving Hannah standing there, her heart still pounding in her chest. She took a slow breath, trying to calm herself. but the feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. Hannah started walking again, her pace quicker now, as though the fear that had gripped her earlier was starting to resurface. Her footsteps echoed in the silence of the night, and every crack of a twig or gust of wind seemed amplified in the emptiness. She could still hear the whispers in her mind, faint and distant, like they were just on the edge of her consciousness. "It's just in my head," she muttered to herself, but the uncertainty lingered. She glanced at the dark road ahead, wondering if the house's curse had truly been lifted, or if it would follow her forever. As Hannah walked, the road began to curve, and she found herself facing a dense, dark forest. The path ahead was unclear, but she could feel something drawing her in. She had nowhere to go but forward. The trees loomed above her, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers, casting long, jagged shadows on the ground. She felt small under their towering presence. The wind picked up again, sending a chill through her bones, and with it came a faint whisper. "Come back." The voice was soft but insistent, like the wind itself was speaking to her. Hannah stopped dead in her tracks. She recognized that voice. It was familiar, but it couldn't be. She had left it behind. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned slowly toward the forest, fear creeping up her spine. Without thinking, Hannah stepped into the forest, the earth soft beneath her boots. The air smelled damp, and the shadows seemed to grow darker the deeper she walked. Her mind raced with questions, but the only answer she received was the soft rustling of the trees, as if they were whispering to her. The path became harder to see, the trees growing thicker, their branches entangling above her like a twisted canopy. She could still hear the whispers in the distance, calling her name, growing louder with every step. "I'm not going back," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. The woods seemed to mock her, the whispers echoing, but Hannah pushed on, determined. There was no turning back now. She had to face whatever this place was, whatever it had become. Hannah felt her heart race as she ventured deeper into the forest. The whispering voices growing louder with each step. The trees around her seemed to close in, their twisted branches like hands reaching out to grab her. The darkness felt alive, pulsating with a malevolent force. Every step she took was heavier than the last, the air thick with an unseen pressure. The whispers were no longer just in her mind. They were real, and they were closing in on her. "Hannah." One voice whispered, a name she thought she had left behind. She stopped, her breath shallow, the weight of the moment suffocating. The past and the present blurred together in the darkness, and for a moment she felt as if she were trapped in time itself. She had to face this, face what was chasing her, or she would never escape. The voices seemed to grow louder, more insistent, until they filled her ears completely. "Hannah." They spoke in unison, a chorus of her own fears, her regrets. She covered her ears, but the sound only intensified. She couldn't run from it, couldn't hide from it. The past, the house, everything she had tried to escape, it was all here, alive in the shadows. "You can't run from your past," the voices continued. Hannah dropped to her knees, her hands trembling, the weight of her mistakes pressing down on her. She felt trapped, but there was no escaping the truth. "I have to face it," she whispered, barely able to hear her own voice over the growing cacophony. The shadows shifted again, and the feeling of being watched returned. She was not alone. Suddenly, the forest grew silent. The whispers stopped, but Hannah could still feel their presence, lingering just beyond the edge of her consciousness. She opened her eyes, looking around, unsure of what had happened. The darkness that had surrounded her seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. And then she saw it. A figure emerged from the trees, its form indistinct but unmistakably there. Hannah froze, her heart pounding. The figure moved toward her, its presence both terrifying and familiar. She didn't need to see its face to know what it was. It was the house, its darkness made flesh, walking toward her. She wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. The figure drew closer, and with it came the same cold, suffocating feeling that had once trapped her inside. As the figure approached, Hannah felt the ground beneath her shift. It was as though the forest itself was reacting to the figure's presence. The leaves rustled, and the trees groaned in a low, mournful sound. "You can't escape me," the figure whispered. Its voice was a low, guttural version of the whispers she had heard before. "You belong to this place. It has always been your home." Hannah struggled to her feet, her legs unsteady, but she could not break free from the weight of its words. She wanted to fight back, wanted to scream, but she could only stare as the figure drew closer, its presence suffocating. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but firm. "I won't let you win." The words felt like a lie, but they were all she had left. The figure loomed over Hannah, but she stood tall, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You have no power over me," she said, her voice shaking but determined. As the figure reached out, the shadows around Hannah began to recoil, like they were being pushed away. She felt a surge of strength, a pulse of energy that she hadn't known she had. With one final cry, she pushed the darkness back, the force of it sending the figure reeling. For the first time she felt in control. The forest seemed to tremble, the air lightening with every breath she took. The figure staggered backward, its form flickering, and Hannah felt the grip of fear loosen. "It's over," she said, her voice full of finality. The figure dissolved into the shadows, and the forest around her began to calm.